Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for having us here. I'm really glad. It's really great that this conference is in Latvia and the Baltics and some of the countries that maybe did the most in anticipating the situation that we're currently in. So welcome to our session on a really crucial topic that will set the scene for this entire conference: forecasting and closing the defense skills gap. The theme of this conference is urgent. Defending the future is no longer an abstract concept, but it's an imperative. The Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine has reshaped Europe's security landscape. And I had more prepared on this, but I think Thomas already addressed most of this, so I'm skipping ahead a little bit. In light of the US's, the Americans' shifting commitment to this, the security umbrella, Europe's defense is an imperative. It is imperative that Europe becomes more self-reliant, and the result are these historic commitments towards defense spending and towards building up the armed forces and the defense industry at large. The headlines focus on budget and hardware, but the real challenge goes beyond finance. It's people, and that's why we are all here in this room. When armed forces and defense companies are struggling to hire, to retain, and to retrain their personnel, the skills gap isn't just a skills gap, it becomes a strategic vulnerability in light of Russian aggression. A couple of words on the format. We have 5 expert panelists, and the goal here is really to discuss actionable strategies of how the different stakeholders in the labor market ecosystem can address this skills gap. So for the next 70 minutes, 5 expert panelists will be on the stage. We didn't quite discuss the format. I was actually expecting them to already be here, but that is fine. I can call them up individually, and they will come up here. But yeah, so we'll have 5 expert presentations, and what's really crucial, we're in a room here full of experts from public employment services, from the defense industry, from the military, from different sectors, and we really want to encourage your participation, so we'll leave about 25 to 30 minutes for Q&A, so please listen carefully, please note down your questions, and at the end, we hope to make this as interactive a discussion as possible. But yeah, let me introduce the panelists. First, from the OECD, we have Ms. Tilde Jacobsen, and please come up here to make sure that we are, and I'm going to introduce everybody, but Tilde will be the first one to present. Next, from the Swedish Employment Service, Mr. Sean Mendes, local here, from the crucial industrial base, we have Mrs. Elina Ekle-Lokmele. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope I am. She's from the Federation of Security and Defense Industries of Latvia. And last but not least, from Accenture, we have Mr. Maximilian Balvans. And yeah, everybody's here? Great. Let me give the floor to Tilde Jacobsen. And to begin, we really want to ground this discussion in the data. So the OECD has done a lot of work on analyzing the skill gaps, and the recruitment and hiring needs of the defense industry in Europe. And we really want to have a look at this evidence-based map of the European defense labor market, where are the jobs, what skills are in demand, and how these trends are evolving. So, Tilde?
Thanks so much, Matt. Maybe now I took your chair? Or
No, I can, I'm flexible.
Okay, good. Can I change the slides myself from up here, or?
I think you have a...
Let's see if, yeah, we try one more. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So, as said, my name is Tilde. I work at the OECD, so based in Paris, but originally from Denmark. And as I told some of you yesterday evening, I kind of invited myself to this conference because when I first saw the theme of the conference, I got really excited. I think it's the first one of an international kind to really discuss this topic in depth. So thanks so much to Wapes, Nicole, all the colleagues for putting this on the agenda. And it came at a time when we had just started a new work stream at the OECD on skills for defense. So maybe too much to say that we've done a lot of work, not yet, but we are starting to do a lot of work and really pleased to be here today to present the very preliminary findings, but also to discuss with you what more is needed to get your feedback and see how we can go from here on this very important topic. So I'll say a bit about the background. I give you a couple of preliminary findings on 2 key elements of the work stream, and then I have a final slides on where do we go from here. So that's the discussion part. Background is basically the same as why we're here today and why we have this conference. We have an international context that is forcing a lot of European countries and also beyond to ramp up their public budgets and spending in the defense sector. All is guided, as we already heard, by the new NATO targets of 5% of GDP spending. But one important question, which we're here today to discuss, but which I haven't seen a lot of discussion about at NATO or European level, at least for now, is the question about what about the labor and skills to turn budgets into real action on the ground. As we just heard from Thomas, budgets or money is not enough to make us safe, right? We need people to implement the money on the ground. And importantly, this surge in spending comes at a time where we already see significant labor and skill shortages in many key industries and sectors across Europe. So many of these sectors are also important for the defense industry. So it's not an easy time to find more workers with the right skills to turn budgets into real life actions on the ground. So that's really the background. In terms of what we've set out to do, at least for now, there are 2 main questions that we're looking into. The first is the where, and the second is the who. So we take a place-based approach to understanding how can we turn spending into real-life production and actions by understanding where are companies, defense companies, based, in which certain specific local areas across Europe, and then understanding what is the labor and skills that they need. Is this labor skills available in the local area, or do we need to take different measures into action to get people to move or to train to become available for the defense companies. And importantly, this is the quantitative part of the work, but of course the ambition is to use that to guide action from public employment services so that training, reskilling programs, but also labor mobility programs can be guided and targeted directly to this sector. So I'll say a few words about the where first and then the who afterwards. So the first, the where, is about the geography of the defense sector. Importantly to say, first of all, is that we have zoomed in on 9 European countries, at least for now. The ambition is to go beyond that and even beyond Europe, if possible, and if data allows. So the 9 countries are Belgium, Czechia, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Sweden. We could have chosen Finland, the Baltic countries, many others also, but these are some of the countries where we already see commitments in new budgets and spending, but we're also some of the countries where we know that a lot of defense establishments are in place. In terms of, I won't go too much into the technical details about how we have identified places, but what I can say is that we have used a data set from the Aerospace and Defense Industries Association of Europe, which gives us the geolocation of defense establishments. So not just the headquarters, because some of these companies are really big multinational companies, and we want to know where the headquarters is. We want to know where they produce their stuff. And that we get through this data set. So it's an extensive but not exhaustive data set. And I'll come back later to discussions on alternative types on how to measure and identify the industry. But for now, this is the approach that we have used. Then, as a first step, we've looked into whether or not these establishments are based in rural, more remote areas, or in more urban city center areas. And a first finding is that only around 13% of these establishments are based in remote areas. And I'll come back to that, but I think that's maybe linked to the need for high-skilled labor in this sector. So Most of them are based near or in cities, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest cities. So around 15% are based in cities that are from 50,000 to 250,000. So big cities, but not metropolitan areas. So that's a first finding. Second, given that we know that they are mainly based around cities, we're using the concept of functional urban areas as, in our view, an ideal territorial level to approach the kind of the narrowing down of what we call defense hubs. So places where there are at least one significant establishment of a defense company in a place. So functional urban areas is basically a city and its commuting zone. Doesn't have to be a big city, but a well-defined city with a government level and a community zone around it. And what we see is that in the countries that we have looked at, around 160 out of 330 are what we then call defense FUAs. So areas where there is at least one establishment of a defense company. And you can see on the map the intensity of the number of establishments per 50,000 people, I think it is. So there are some of the big ones. You have in France, for example, Paris, you have Toulouse, you have Stockholm, Copenhagen, Prague, Belgium and the Netherlands. It's all over the place almost. So it gives you an indication of actually how widespread defense production is, but also how it's centered around certain areas. And on average, these areas are around 55% larger than the average FUA in these countries, and they make up around 4.3% of GDP on average, compared to around 3% on average in a general FUA, so city plus commuting area. So that's a bit about the place, and we need to take that first step to really narrow down then the next question: what is the skills and labor that is needed in these specific places? So I'll move on to the second part, which is the who, which I think is in the end what you're really mostly interested about. And I have to say here, it's just early findings. We have more that I don't have time to share, and also hopefully more will come later in this research brand, but just a couple of findings. So first of all, it's really a high skills sector. Almost 80% of job postings made by defense companies in defense hubs are for high skilled jobs. And to measure this, I should say we've used what's called Lightcast data, so data on online job postings. Again, we can do much more with this data, but that's the approach we've used for now. And as said, it shows us the really high demand for high-skilled labor in this sector. And we can also look into some of the types of roles or the industries, jobs that are demanded. So they are really dominated by engineering, aviation, telecommunication, and logistics, but also encompass a wide spectrum of occupations in IT, security services, and industrial trades. And just because it's very high skilled, it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of production manufacturing going on here. It's just a question about this manufacturing being relatively technical, specialized, demanding certain very high skilled types of people and jobs. But then if you look into the development of the demand, and I think that's really interesting given all the geopolitical changes at the moment. First of all, we saw a surge in postings in these sectors and in these areas around 21, 22. And after that, it has returned to more or less normal growth. And I think this spike was likely very conflict driven, if we think about this time in history. And since then, we haven't really seen the spike, which I would expect to see, but I think it's a question about the time it takes for political decisions to trickle down into actual spending on the ground. So I'm sure if we measure this again in a year's time, we'll see that spike that we also saw around 21, 22, and maybe even bigger than that, given the commitments that least we hear at political level for now. Another interesting finding is that we see actually mostly an increase in middle and low skill jobs postings in the sector. So, I mean, again, it's hard to say, it's early stages why we see this, but it can be that really it's starting from the very bottom. We need to produce more, while the management, the researchers are already in place, but there's just a need for more people on the ground to get production going. And then there's a thing about the armed forces. That's actually the one we've seen growing the fastest, but also from a very low level. And you say that's a separate category when we speak about skills levels. So armed forces are not defined as low, middle, or high skilled people. It's just armed forces because it's difficult to say kind of their technical experience level. So they have kind of a separate category when we measure this. One last slide on the findings. If we look a bit more into the sectors, the industries, the type of skills in demand, we see that skills in public safety, national security and engineering dominate jobs postings in defense, and they're really far above the labor market average. It's really significant for this sector, and it includes skills in safety and surveillance, technology, aerospace, transport, and intelligence. And in addition to this, we also see, as I said, strong demand in manufacturing, logistics, and IT, and that's what you can see some of it on the figure over here. So that's early findings. We have already more findings that I couldn't include in this PowerPoint, just given the time limit. But I hope that's already some interesting findings for you. And I think, given that we know this, our approach at the OECD is that for public employment services to really use this information and to guide people and the workforce into the right jobs that are in demand, we need to take both a skills-based approach, but also a place-based approach to skills and job transitions. So we need to know not only if workers have the right skills or competencies, but we also need to know if they are based in the area where there is a rising demand, or if not, if they're mobile to go there. Because all our research so far shows that people are generally not very mobile. They tend to stay where they are, even if they don't have employment. So PES needs to develop both measures to and upskill in targeted ways that are linked directly to the needs of the sector, but they also need to develop mobility measures that can make sure that people are available for jobs where the jobs are placed. And that's really what we're trying to do in a separate work stream here on measuring skills proximity between different occupations, but also job proximity in terms of geography where people are placed. So in the interest of time, I skipped this slide, which goes more into detail about this approach that we're trying to develop with different public employment services across the OECD. And then I actually go to the last slide on going forward. And really, this is also where I'm interested to have your feedback, any questions. But as said, this is the early beginning of hopefully a bigger work stream. And there are three things at least that we want to do in addition. So first of all, we want to turn the quantitative results into policy guidance for public employment services. So ideally, this data in a more well-developed form, targeted specific countries, should help public employment services design training programs, mobility programs for the defense sector. And it should also inform employers about what they can do to train their workers and how we can facilitate job transitions. Secondly, we want to measure and learn more about labor mismatches and job transitions. So there's further analytical work to do here. By now, we know a bit about the skills composition and demand in the defense sector, but we also need to know what is actually the available labor force in those places, and do they match or not? And if they don't match, what do we do about it? And then thirdly, as I alluded to a bit earlier, we also want to be much better at measuring and defining the defense industry. This is an early stage where we use, as I said, a data set that can guide us, but we can do much more in terms of taking an industry approach to understanding what is really the defense industries or companies that make up the sector, and from there try to measure more in detail the places and the skills that are needed. So I'll leave it at that. And please find me. I'm here the rest of the day. So if you have any questions or ideas on how to go further, I'm very happy to discuss. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tilde. Great, really interesting. And I think it becomes quite clear that the skill needs of the defense sector are significant, and that they, especially in the high and middle skill sector, significantly overlap with the requirements of other sectors as well. But yeah, given the importance of this sector, and this is what coming to Sean now, given the importance of this sector, how does the role of a public employment service expand into the core of national security? What is the role of a PES in making sure that the defense sector has the skills they need? And can you go a little bit into the details of how Arbeitsvermittlungen has this role of a preparedness authority in the total defense strategy? And I think if you want to use your slides, I think you have to go to the lectern.
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here today. My presentation, and I think all of our presentations in this panel are looking at this from very different perspectives. And when I think about our perspective, one thing that's really useful and interesting is we, especially at these meetings, we learn from each other. And I think a lot of the Swedish learning, even more than during the war in Ukraine, was during the pandemic crisis. And we learned a lot looking at Finland, hello, and the societal resilience. So I'll tell you a little bit about our journey to build a more resilient public employment service and this concept of total defense. So here I am. Arbetsförmedlingens, and this is my most badass face I can give. When we're talking defense, normally I'm the social policy guy, but this is taken by a Serbian photographer at a wedding, trying to look tough. So that's as tough as I get. Except when you see me running away from attacks. So Arbetsförmedlingens role in total defense. First off, I can try to share with you all our concept of total defense in terms of the Swedish concept, and it integrates military and civil responsibilities to maintain national resilience in times of crises. So not just war, but all forms of crises, black swan events, wars. It's about societal roles in crisis, and all sectors, including public bodies and individuals, have defined roles in supporting society during emergencies. Arbetsförmedlingens preparedness role is about maintaining critical labor market functions to ensure economic security during national emergencies. And I think all of us have been very impressed by how, we often hear questions, how does Ukraine continue to function in the midst of a war? It's not only about military efforts, it's about all forms of societal resilience, delivering power, delivering critical labor sources, food, water. So we all have a role, including at the Public Employment Service. And finally, and this broader concept of strategic, total defense, strategic importance. And this is about Arbetsförmedlingens preparedness and our status to ensure that we can continue to deliver core functions in society. What is the importance of preparedness? One area is a role of economic and employment stability. And this means employment and income stabilize society during crises such as wars and natural disasters and help to prevent social unrest. And one thing we often think from most of us don't have a lot of experience of war, and we think that it's probably something that will happen quickly and end quickly. And again, we just have to look to Ukraine and see, okay, it's not a matter of a few days or a few months, it's now stretching into years. So we need to build a societal resilience to handle that. It's about the vulnerability of social services. Interruptions in job matching and benefit services could not only impact vulnerable populations, but it also could undermine public trust in the society, which we need to maintain in terms of crisis and war. It's about preparedness as national resilience. So this is about continuous service delivery under stress is vital for national resilience, and it requires robust systems and robust planning. And here, Arbetsförmedlingens critical role safeguards Sweden's economic and social fabric within the total defense strategy. If I can share with you briefly a bit about mandate and responsibilities, and I have a short presentation, so it won't take too much time. We have an official status as a preparedness authority, a beredskapsmyndighet, we say in Swedish. And this is about crisis continuity planning. So the agency develops and maintains plans to ensure uninterrupted employment services during crises and heightened alert periods. We do risk and vulnerability analysis. So we do regular assessments to identify risks and vulnerabilities to strengthen preparedness and response capabilities. And I think something most of us see in our everyday work is hacker attacks, which are constantly stressing and shutting down our system. So this is just the pointy edge of the sword before moving into even more critical threats. But we even see this in our everyday operations. It's also about interagency collaboration. So we need close cooperation with other government agencies to ensure coordinated responses and operational efficiency during emergencies. And we're in a group with social sector, with other agencies that support income support, employment support in other areas. And finally, on this point, it's about a wartime placement strategy. So this is reserving essential personnel for critical functions, both to ensure that our agency continues to function, but that other core societal functions work under emergencies and in wartime. So final area, what challenges and strategic actions do I want to raise for all of us here today? The first is about modern labor market vulnerabilities. So that it's the interconnected and digital labor market introduce risks such as cyber threats and supply chain disruptions, both of which we've seen in recent years. It's about robust risk analysis and preparedness. Here we do biannual risk assessments and simulation exercises to improve readiness against emerging threats. And we're building this capacity continually and investing more in it. It's about governance and operational continuity. So structured government with Region K activation ensures clear leadership during crises. And finally, it's about proactive communication. It's about maintaining communication with stakeholders, and this ensures clarity and readiness for emergencies and for wartime.
Next up, we have the defense industry. So the industrial ecosystem that supports the armed forces, that supports our defense preparedness is obviously very important, and facing, again, leading on Tilda's presentation, very, very similar challenges to the armed forces as well. So Mrs. Elina Egle-Lokmele, Lachmele, thank you, sorry, will give us the perspective of the Defense Industries Employers Organization of Latvia, and really excited to hear what the hashtag Power of Partnership can do to fill the skills gap for the defense industries.
Yes, thank you for having me here, and I have to confess that during the financial crisis I had a duty as Employers Confederation Director to also be part of and lead the advisory committee of Latvian Employment Agency. So I feel a little bit like back in old waters. So it's a really big pleasure for me to be here. And I had this worry on our online meeting with all of the speakers that probably I will completely change my mind what I'm going to talk about during my few minutes here. And indeed, being in Kiev last week and putting my notes down, I understood that probably I cannot talk just in a ordinary way. And of course, I was thinking that in your everyday life, you are really working a lot with data, and you want to make right decisions based on data. And I think this is something what we are all living in. We think that data is driving our decisions, and this world is driven by data. But at the same time, I was thinking that probably in this case, we have to think more about observation, and about observation of nature, as our ancestors did. Because we have to see what kind of habits are in a forest. So what kind of habits are in a population. So how many foxes, how many rabbits do we need in a forest? What are their functions to keep the balance in a forest? And with this, I started to think, so how many predators do we have in our nature, in our forests? How many warriors do we have in our population? And how many employers or entrepreneurs do we have in our population in general? So we had in this morning Thomas talking about himself joining National Guard. So we see also in the middle of the picture with soldiers the current Minister of Foreign Affairs. So she's a warrior. And I think that when we were also hearing that more and more Dutch people are joining the armed forces, so this is something else. This is not about just a career choice. It's not just a path to go. So, and it's also a big question for me when I'm looking on my members, their ambition not to sit in nice, comfortable offices, but to go into battlefields, to go in testing fields, to be together with the soldiers. And all just being part of the drone coalition for Ukraine, like every second week to see that something is not working, that electronic warfare is knocking you down, and that you have to change. And you have no contract, you have no money on the table. You invest your companies, your families' resources to prove that you can build something what's working. And it's not just something what defends, it's something also to kill. And then we have to think why there will be warriors and what kind of values they will be driven to defend. And what's the time when we can really teach, upskill all those values so that we have those people, those warriors and entrepreneurs in society which are ready to defend our nations. And regarding the time when, I would say that probably the right time when in our population in Latvia would be the time when kids start to sing and dance. This summer we had one of the most emotional event when tens of thousands of Latvian kids were singing and dancing together. So it's not just about economical value which we defend. It's not about comfortable houses, offices, or nice infrastructure we defend. We defend something much, much more. And it's a big question how many people in Europe will be ready to defend what they have. And regarding this, of course, all nations should be together and take their role. And coming back from Ukraine, I just understand that unfortunately we would not be able to defend until we would not be there and be together with them in the battlefield. So what we do in my position, so we have been working since 2013. For us, probably the occupation of part of Georgia was the first signal. But of course, we had financial crisis and we had other things to lean on. But we are working currently, first of all, to educate entrepreneurs. What kind of activities do they have to do? How to engage with armed forces? What to do? We are also providing all the technical information, how to participate in procurements and how to be prepared when capacities will be necessary. Also to encourage them to invest, because I think in a peacetime people are probably joining armed forces and military companies more because of this perception that it's something very, very interesting. But in these times when we are called to defend the values, it's a bit different. So we are engaging with scientific organizations. We are showing the works what researchers and scientists do. Mainly encourage, engage, and enable so that we are not only skilled people ourselves, because it's really very easy to teach technical skills at some stage, but you don't know how to teach patriotism, how to teach the value orientation. So, and as it was also told by Tilda, so the skills which we need are in all areas. Would it be energy supply? Would it be communication? Would it be electronics, ICT sector? We've had huge capacities in our research institutions. These will be very highly skilled people, because we cannot get any kind of good, deep tech products if we are not engaging with scientific institutions. We are learning a lot from each other, working in a NATO ecosystem, working with the largest primes to integrate the capacities what were mentioned today. Would it be air defense? Would it be Navy or fire and rescue service? So industry is there together with the largest primes to integrate those systems. We are very actively engaging internationally with our colleagues, working on different initiatives like Drone Coalition, like supporting the strategic industries of Ukraine. And above all, I think this is the right momentum to talk with our societies, to call for them to come to our armed forces, to come to the industry, and to devote what they have. Because this is the right time to fight for the freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alina. And I would echo that. Every time I'm in Kyiv, I'm impressed by the sense of duty and patriotism that people feel. And obviously the cultural shift is another asset when it comes to recruitment and retention. So if people feel duty bound or feel a moral obligation to contribute to defense, that will make all the things we are talking about, recruitment, retention, training, upskilling, a lot easier and a lot more barrier free. So thank you. Finally, Max. Yeah. Speaking of retention, speaking of how can we ensure that people, once they join the armed forces, once they join the defense industry, actually stay there? Max is here to give us a global perspective. I think your example comes from Singapore. So it'd be really interesting to hear how, what different strategies, what different approaches there are to increase retention, to make sure that once we've mastered the challenge of recruitment, once people have the right skills, that they actually stay in those jobs as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think, I also had to rethink of everything I planned to say based on the prior presentations. I will try it. So let me start at the beginning as a recap on the past WAVES conferences and all the discussions around the key challenges in the employment ecosystem. I would narrow it down, I would say, to one key challenge, which is the shortage of skilled workforce. And having this situation now in the defense sector is giving this completely other perspective, especially for me. And I think, especially because if we are not capable of fixing that problem, maybe we are not able to pretend ourselves properly in the case of a threat. So when we look at the defense sector from the workforce perspective, and I understand now that the focus is going more into also low-skill profiles and also other challenges like morale or patriotism, it's also, I think, important to understand maybe or distinguish between two parts. The one part, I would say, from the workforce perspective is the producing part. We're producing the materials, the ammunition, the materials, and the other part, the military personnel. And on the producing side, we see that they're on a daily basis getting more involved in developing new technologies, and also applying artificial intelligence, big data, advanced analytics, quantum technologies, etc., etc. And with this, they are increasingly competing against the big tech. So for talent. Yeah? And on the other part, the military personnel, we need to enable them to fight this warfare of the future on computers, in some parts, and therefore they need to be enabled to fly drones, to combine our armies in Europe, and also to fight cyber wars. We already touched on that, and they are also competing against this market for the high-skilled labor, and all of this, and we touched already on this, is we have these high attrition drivers. Unmet expectations, work-life strain, limited career pathways, and maybe also weak family engagement. So how should we as PES, or from the public employment space, what should we do? And sometimes, or what I would try now to is zoom out and look at some global trends that we need to discuss, maybe to leverage. And the first trend I like to highlight is the trend of agentic AI. 4 years ago, we talked about Gen AI. Now everything is about agentic AI. So for those who are not maybe familiar with the term agentic AI, Gen AI is focused on generating content, especially text, pictures, code, etc. Agentic AI goes far beyond that. So these agent systems, they are really proactively performing tasks or workflows. They are capable of doing solving multi-stop problems, and they interacting with each other, and they are also interacting with systems and services. So this leads us to a completely new area of use cases. And we are implementing and I represent the industry here, we are implementing this for our clients, especially in the core processes, implementing chatbot solutions, recommendations, also on completely renewing contact centers, for instance, also in social services, giving live stage support, etc. But it's also capable of really getting deep understanding of maybe service gaps or security gaps. And this also leads to, I think, in the defense space, to several areas of application where we can use that. The second global trend I would like also to touch on is the leveraging learning platforms. To fill the skill gap that we already discussed, I think it is really important to have a nationwide initiative. And we see that in other countries, for instance, in the Middle East, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they initiated a complete free scholarship for the Saudi population. And they trained them in 3 years in partnership with Udacity, who is a learning platform provider from the US, the whole part of the population. And they were capable of training 20,000 people, 20,000 Saudis, 70% of them were under 30, in these technologies that are needed for their economy. Especially AI, digital marketing, production management, etc. So there are ways that we need to rethink also leveraging it from the PES perspective for the defense sector in preparation for the future. And the last thing I would like to touch on is the end-to-end digital journey. I think most of the public service organizations are still modernizing their core, their digital core. And but there are things that are going beyond that. For instance, the German Labor Agency, they implemented the first marketing automation platform in-house, what I ever heard of globally in public services. So really to funnel people into the processes. It's not enough just to provide digital services. You also need to bring the people to the services. And these kind of technologies, we need to think of how can we make use of that, also to leverage it for us all. So so once we have the digital core in place, and you are capable, you have the data, and you are capable of using all such technologies, I brought this example here from Singapore. So in Singapore, Accenture helped the Ministry of Defense to develop this user-centric portal for all the defense workforce. So the people there are capable of really managing their own services, resources, their career pathways, etc. And I think what's notable here at this example is they also provide access to the family, to parents, also to the employers, etc., so that we have this platform to interact with each other, and this also gives personal engagement into this process and enhances also the personal network. And the platform is built in a way that it ensures the data security, which is absolutely necessary in this kind of space. And the people also have the transparency about what data is in the system, etc. So I think, and I stop here, we think also because of timing, this is just one example of what you can achieve once you have this platform in place. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Max. Really, really appreciate it, and really interesting example of how sort of wraparound services and centralized services can support retention and can support the continued engagement with all of the different stakeholders as well. In the interest of time, I think we'll move to audience Q&A, and I think do we have a roaming microphone to prepare? Okay, yeah, but yeah, we can, but yeah, okay, someone has to probably deliver it, maybe I can deliver it, that's fine as well. But I want to give sort of an impulse to the audience to have to give you something to think about, and that is really, so we're all sitting in different silos. All the different people here on stage come from different stakeholders within the labor market, and I want you to think about a little bit like what are the barriers, whether they're bureaucratic, cultural, financial, that prevent a seamless talent pipeline from education through the public employment service, through the industry to defense, and what can we do to break down those silos and enable better cooperation between these different stakeholders. So that's a question partially for the audience, but also for you to think about. And please, if you have any questions, otherwise I'll have to ask more questions of the panelists myself. Any questions in the audience? Any contributions from the audience? I see Niels nodding. I'll bring you the microphone.
Thank you very much. My name is Niels Liemann. I'm from the Netherlands PES UWV. It's great to be here with all of you, and thank you very much for this interesting panel with these different perspectives. To Tilde. And we saw these defense hubs. And my question for you is, would you advise the defense industry to move more towards rural areas to find more employment, or would you advise other strategies?
Okay, thank you. Very, very important question. And it allows me to allude actually a bit on the second part of this work stream, which look into not the human capability size, but the industry capacities beyond skills. And I think there we team up with our rural development team at the OECD. And basically, I think what we see, at least for now, given the high skills composition, there's just a trade-off in terms of access to high skills, which are generally more available in bigger cities, versus access to space and other capacities that are needed. And there you might need to go outside of the bigger cities to get access to that. So the second part of this work stream is actually that we're looking into what are the industry capacities needed for the defense sector to scale up, looking into the places where there's already defense establishments in place. What are their value chains? How do they link with other regions? What are the key dimensions, facilitators linking to transport, energy provision, all the other things that are needed to get the production going? And where are the best situated places to access this? Another key question we look into is how can you turn downwards going stories into turnaround stories. So take, for example, the mobile sector or the automobile sector. We have examples already in Germany where some plants are actually being returned into defense productions. So how can we use the increasing spending on defense to turn some of the more challenging stories in rural or remote areas in Europe into positive stories? So I think there's definitely more work to be done on the rural side, and for now we focus more on the city part of it, but it's a very important question and something that we can use in Europe, not only to speed up defense production, but also to turn negative stories into positive stories in terms of rural development. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Dario Rosic. I'm a retired Sergeant Major from Croatian Armed Forces, and I'm here like in the role of a guest speaker, but tomorrow, not today. And I like to point one question. I'm not referred to anybody. First of all, thank you, all of you panelists that provide such interesting information and also like view insight of current situation as of now. But I like to touch some things regarding the talent acquisition and the workforce planning as we using now, looking in the like changes technically and the war fighting changes as of now occurred in the world, and especially in the European region. What are you thinking about or changing the workforce planning structure or process in the future, at least for the next few years, because we are already planning for this now? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dario. It's a really interesting question because we already see in our experience working with Ukraine that there are significant changes in even the skill requirements within Ukrainian units since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So how do we workforce plan in a rapidly shifting world? Elina?
I will be probably provocative, but I will say no planning. We just buy out the best drone pilots from universities we can. We just buy out. And we have no contracts yet. We just put personal money, we risk personal money. Because all these 5% of GDP, what we have been told us in this morning, nothing is on a table. Not for armed forces guys and not for industry guys. So we just buy out with everything what we can, because we know that these drones can be tomorrow in Latvia again.
I guess I will just add a couple of maybe just key words on this. I think employer engagement is key. So one thing is from the public training provision side that we can do shorter, more flexible, more kind of timely curricula aligned to constantly changing needs. But a lot of this has to be done also when people are already in the workforce and when they are in the workplace. So figuring out how to get incentives right to strengthen employer engagement in the provision, I think is really key to keep up with the constantly changing demand. And the second point is the skills-based approach, as Kasper has also explained, like we really need to be moving beyond job focus or occupation focus. We need to understand how skills can be extremely transversal across various types of occupations, and it really, we need to go beyond the silo thinking here, otherwise we'll not get people into the right jobs. But that's difficult.
I think in some ways, reflecting broadly on the question, in some ways we've moved forward well as the Swedish Public Employment Service in terms of this resilience and planning to deliver services during crisis and war. And in other manners, because we're primarily an agency that help the unemployed to get jobs, I think we do well in terms of reallocating human capital and skills. The area where we're really underperforming, in my opinion, and hopefully my Director General would agree, is, and you were in on it, and it's just, we've seen what's happened in Ukraine. A huge part of defense is actually very cutting-edge IT skills. And there we know that Sweden and many of the countries here have been very, very dependent on skilled migration, both within Europe, which we perhaps don't use as much, but from third country. Huge part of the Swedish IT sector, the cutting edge is coming from India and other countries. And that's a broad labor market issue, which is also about our, let's call it global resilience for democratic countries. We need to be able to reach people around the world who are going to be able to contribute to this cutting edge AI automated drone techniques, which can both defend against drone, but also be used in offensive ways when necessary. So in this regard, I think the public employment services in Europe have to probably up our game in terms of being better at being able to help our countries to acquire those skills which we need in this emerging defense areas as well.
Thank you, Sean. And just to pick up on one point that Tilda mentioned, that you reflected on as well, and I think that's the role of education providers in being engaged in there. Do we feel, asking a question for myself to the panel, do we feel that education providers right now, whether it's initial education, TVET, universities, etc., that people are leaving with the right skills for industry, that people are leaving with the right skills for the armed forces? Or is there a disconnect between, let's call it the demand-led, employer-led curriculum development and, and the skills, the capabilities that people are leaving school, university, continuing education with?
That I definitely agree with Kasper that there continues to be a mismatch in terms of provision and demand. I don't think it's by definition that they have to be behind. I think we see a lot of examples popping up linked to the green transition, the digital transition, and especially bottom-up examples from local areas, training institutions that develop new ways to have a more agile and flexible provision and curricular development. And I think given that things are moving so fast as they are, I think it's really important in all countries to reconsider the kind of central planning, strategic vision versus the development locally where things are popping up and where you see demand growing immediately firsthand, and it can take some time to kind of go from the local level all the way up to the national strategy, so that flexibility and balance in terms of how you plan nationally versus how you let things develop in regions or local areas, I think is extremely important to get to those good examples of how we hopefully develop systems that are not providing as big as mismatch as we do today in many countries.
Thank you.
If I may, I would say that unfortunately I think that we are starting to think about STEAM education too late. Usually you see a lot of activities what our universities are doing, but to get the qualified kids just to enter universities, it's probably too late. And in the same time, I would say that probably kids are doing this job themselves, and I would say that probably many parents have been protected by their kids not to do some wrong activities on their computers, not to be too vulnerable. And I think this is like one thing, but also in general, I think that the right place for that is preschool, where to teach critical thinking, where to teach how to communicate, where to teach also the confidence, what's necessary, creativity, and these are the things which should be in curriculums and already in kindergartens. At least this is something what I have been also doing with my American franchisee Foster Kids in Latvia. Yeah.
Thank you, Elina. I think we might have time for one more question, if there's any other question in the audience. Not at the moment. Okay, in that case, I will sort of move along to sort of the takeaways, and I think I would like to invite every member of this panel, every participant in this panel, to give your perspective from your stakeholder, from the stakeholder that you represent, of what you would like an audience member from a public employment service to take away as to what is the most concrete step that they can take, that we can take together to make sure that the defense skill gap is addressed and that we move towards a situation of preparedness both in the armed forces, in the defense industry, as a pass, and from the private sector as well. So I'm going to start with Max right next to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think also based on the discussion, I think we need to think in two ways. I think there's like an emerging demand, and we need to figure out how to, as PAS, we can support this emerging demand. On the other side, and also from the technology perspective, when I look at the landscape, I see different platforms, different kind of data structures, etc. still there. And I think what we need is to combine or to define joint initiatives based on industry, military, and the PAS to set up the right structure to be able also to provide all these necessary services in different kind of ways, and for that also to really start small with fast initiatives now. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that we can cope with peacetime situations, but my biggest worry, of course, is how we will function in emergency situations, in a large-scale emergencies, and as it was also mentioned today, in a long time emergencies. And probably I also would say that we cannot just lean on the world we have been living in. We have to be prepared that armed forces are approaching agencies and asking for support. We haven't been playing scenarios of full mobilization. So what employment agencies would do in these situations. And we've seen that there has been a lot of distortions of, also of the in the industry in a wartime in Ukraine, when just half of your employees are not in working places anymore. So how do we function? How economy functions? So this is a big question mark, and I think that these scenarios should be played out together with, first of all, with critical services providers, and afterwards with armed forces, and then probably with general civilian sectors. But I would say that some gaming is necessary here as well.
Thank you. In addition to, my presentation was mainly about building societal resilience, building resilient institutions to deliver public services, and even individuals, building individual resilience. Obviously Casper's points resonate very much with me from the public employment service perspective, that it's not only a challenge to deal with skills supply. We're in the midst of a demographic crisis in Europe, a really serious demographic crisis. So we'd have trouble ensuring skills supply even if defense requirements were not growing. With defense requirements growing, then it's going to be critical. What does this mean? Here, Sweden actually has positive examples for many countries. It means ensuring that everybody contributes, That means increasing the participation of women, increasing the participation of other underrepresented groups, people with disabilities, people with lower levels of education, recent immigrants and refugees. So this is really one area where Sweden has been high performing, as we have the highest labor market participation in Europe. Rolling out tools to bring people in. You're mentioning cooks, tailors, others. There will be opportunities, and I usually think that necessity is the mother of invention. We've seen this in northern Sweden, where they have an acute demographic crisis and nobody to work. Then employers are willing to think more creatively and bring in women in traditional male jobs, immigrants and others. So this will be important, and we need to help with this transition. And the other point I have, relating mainly perhaps to what Elina was saying, is this whole cutting edge IT, AI technology skills. There will be a role there too, and I'm imagining that a big role there will be. We have a strength when we face opponents in that, that we're the democratic world, not just in Europe, other parts, and we're attractive. The brightest people in India, even China and other areas, will have a tendency to want to come here. And I think by being open to cross-border skills, we will have a strength as well there on that other side. But that's my perspective.
I mean, I very much agree. I had 3 points, but you covered one of them also. I think the first one is increasing labor market participation, widening the target groups for the PASS, combining it with talent strategies is extremely important. Secondly, the point on mobility, as I alluded to in my presentation, both skills, occupational mobility, but also geographical mobilities. That's really a job for the PASS to develop the right measures in this field. And third, the point on employer engagement strategies. We really need to become stronger in this field, understanding what works, what are the different measures that could be used, what are the right incentives, who should do what is the right division of tasks between public and private in this field, and how do we work together in the best way to get everyone on board and make sure they have the right skills.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Just to sum it up from my perspective, I think there's a couple of themes that we all touched on and sort of agreed upon. The one is to mirror what Kasper said, look at what people can do. And I think that's sort of the essence and the ethos of skills first, skill based. It's like, look at what people can do, look at the transversal skill sets, and look at where they can contribute in the labor market, in the defense industry, in the armed forces, wherever it may be. That goes along with data-driven strategies on identifying skills, identifying skill gaps, skill mobility, labor mobility, to mirror what Tilde and what Max have said. And finally, last but not least, the power of partnerships. I think in order to make this work, public employment service as employment intermediaries have to fill that role of bringing education, bringing industry, bringing employment intermediation, bringing government together, and making sure that these different stakeholders in the labor market interact, work together, and pull on one string, so to speak. Thank you very much for everybody, all the participants in the panel. Really, really enjoyed this discussion and your contributions. Thank you also to the audience. And I think we're right on time, Nicole? Amazing. Thank you.